Good afternoon. I'm Michael Popa, Executive Director of the Mainstream Coalition. Welcome to the first of two Johnson County Candidate Forums, co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Johnson County, Mainstream Coalition, Advocacy and Awareness Group of Johnson County, ACLU of Kansas, Johnson County Latina Leadership Network, and Northeast Johnson County Chamber of Commerce. Today, we'll be hearing from the candidates running for Johnson County District Attorney. But before we begin, I'll take care of a little housekeeping. In just a moment, I will place the forum guidelines in the chat box. All moderators and candidates are aware of the guidelines and they have agreed to them. The guidelines do lay out the timing that will be used in this forum, but I would like to point out that a visual indicator of the time remaining for each answer will be displayed at the bottom of your screen or in the chat box. If a candidate has not finished answering a question when the allotted time is up, the moderator will politely interject and move to the next candidate. If time allows at the end, we may take questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please submit it using the Zoom Q&A feature. Now, this is different from chat, and it should be located at the bottom of your screen if you are using a computer. If you're joining from a tablet or a smartphone, you might have to tap the More icon to access Q&A. The partner organizations co-sponsoring today's forum believe that our democracy works best when citizens are informed and active. So thank you for taking the time to learn about your candidates running for Johnson County District Attorney before casting your vote in November. And please share this forum with your friends and family. A recording of today's forum will be made available on the League's and Mainstream's YouTube and Facebook pages. And now, I would like to introduce our moderators for today's forum, Haile Sims with Advocacy and Awareness Group of Johnson County, and Kendall Seal with ACLU of Kansas.
Thank you, Michael. I'm glad to be here. And once again, I'd like to welcome everyone to this candidate forum. The first thing I'd like to do is introduce our candidates. We have candidate Steve Howe and candidate Zach Thomas. We'll start with some opening comments. Candidate Steve Howe, you are first.
Thank you and good afternoon. I bring to the table 30 years of prosecution experience, including the last 12 as your district attorney. And I've led the way in implementing some really innovative programs that have been used by my office and our other criminal justice agency partners. They include the lethality assessment for domestic violence victims, fast teams for elder abuse victims. We've also established a law enforcement reporting system called NEJC, and we've also implemented the first Kansas Veterans Treatment Court here in Johnson County. We implemented a co-responder program which embedded mental health workers into law enforcement agencies, and expanded mental health court and many other different services that have really led the way for Johnson County. As a team, we have worked really hard to be leaders and innovators throughout the country. And we bring a really successful program to play, and it is a big part of the success for public safety in Johnson County. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Steve Howe. And now, candidate Zach Thomas.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here, and thank you especially to the sponsors and co-sponsors of this event. It's a fantastic opportunity to learn about us. My name's Zach Thomas. I'm running to be your next Johnson County District Attorney. I was born and raised here in Johnson County. I'm the oldest son of Indian immigrants. I'm the first person of color to ever run for this office. I'm running because I'm tired of watching Johnson County fall behind. I'm tired of credit not being given where credit is due. I am a criminal lawyer. I have years of experience doing criminal law. I am a successful trial lawyer. I will bring that perspective, that experience, and that success to the Johnson County District Attorney's office. I'm running to be your next Johnson County District Attorney because I care about our county. I care deeply about it and want us to be at the forefront, not only in the state, but across the country. And as you'll see by reading my information through the course of today's debate, Johnson County has sadly fallen behind. So I ask for your vote in November. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Zach Thomas. Well, we will start with the questions. Once again, my name is Haile Sims. I am one of the board members of the Advocacy group of Johnson County. Since Steve Howe went first with the opening statements, Zach Thomas, you will answer this question first. And after you answer, Steve Howe, you'll be able to answer also. Question number 1, research shows that implicit bias can result in worse plea offers, higher bail, and longer sentences for Black and Latino people. A recent study completed by Harvard University found systemic racism in the judicial system. People of color were overrepresented and faced longer sentences on average than their white counterparts. As district attorney, what will you do to ensure that disparity does not happen in Johnson County? Would you study past cases to determine if systemic racism was an issue? And what should Johnson County do to track racial disparities in our current system, including disparities in charging decisions, bail recommendations, plea bargains, and sentencing recommendations?
Thank you. The first step in addressing this problem is simply admitting that the problem exists. As a defense lawyer, as a criminal lawyer, I admit that a problem exists. I spend my days in the courtroom. I've spent my days over the past years in the courtroom, Johnson County, municipal courts, and all across the state of Kansas. You can go in and look for your own eyes about the racial disparities. A problem clearly exists. I offer this challenge to Mr. Howe. To date, he has made no such statement, no admission that a problem exists. He's actually argued otherwise. I would ask him to admit that a problem exists. And then after we admit that a problem exists, we've got to address it. We have to start with communication. We have to talk to local police staff, local police chiefs, and open up the door for communications. Internally as an office, what we have to do is we have to train ourselves, myself included, and mandate that implicit bias training be required for all staff, for all individuals in my office. It shouldn't be voluntary, it needs to be mandatory. Then, with regards to how do we track disparity? How do we track the issues going on? Well, the first step is we need to simply look at the stats. In the city of Olathe, for example, African Americans make up a 6% minority group. Yet when you look at the tickets issued by Olathe police, it's 13%. That's not active racism. That's not hatred. That's simply implicit bias. It's a problem we're acknowledging now today, finally, and we need to move forward with it. There are systems set up in place right now that are supposed to allow individuals to complain about potential racial bias, complain about profiling. Yet those systems haven't worked. The systems require submission to the Secretary of State. As district attorney, I will lead the charge to house that, to address that. For if there's a complaint about an officer or law enforcement or a charge anywhere, I welcome those complaints here and we will look at that. We will speak with law enforcement around to determine how those problems exist. When we look at the statistics, when we acknowledge that a problem exists, we can then take steps to address that through education, through conversation, and fix the problem so that that bias does not exist. But the first step is admitting the problem exists. And I admit wholeheartedly that there are racial disparity problems here in Johnson County.
Steve Howe?
It's an interesting question, one that I pose to jurors every single time we pick a jury. And one of the things I talk about in jury selection is we all have bias. It's based on our life experiences. And so as human beings, we're all impacted by our life experiences and they do create biases. And so the important thing is to acknowledge that they exist. And then that way it doesn't allow you, it prevents that from actually driving your behavior. So I do agree that we all deal with biases of different types. And it's something that it's part of being a human being. And so we need to work on that. As far as dealing with those issues, we've worked with the NAACP and other civic groups to address those issues in some workshops and forums. And it's been very productive. And the more we talk and the more we have dialogue, the more we can come up with solutions. And so that's one thing that I'm very proud of. The work I've done with our other criminal justice agency partners is sitting down and talking about those issues. In regards to complaints, I know from talking to the law enforcement agencies, if you have a complaint, they want you to file the complaint with their department so they can review that and determine if there's problems. And so I think it's important, again, dialogue is the key to success, that if we continue to work together to understand each other and what the problems are, we can come up with solutions. And Johnson County has been the leader in the country in coming up with solutions that we face. And so I absolutely think that Johnson County is the right place to address these issues and come up with solutions. Thank you.
All right. I have a question. If elected district attorney, I want to know specifically what you plan to do to develop a relationship of trust with Black and Brown, minority, immigrant, and undocumented individuals in the community. What are your plans to build that relationship of trust?
I plan on continuing to do the things that we've already done, and I talked a little bit about that in the first question. We had forums, and just here this year we had a Zoom chat where we allowed the public to come in and give us questions to the law enforcement community and myself to answer those questions. And I think continued dialogue and discussion comes up with solutions. I talked about the work group that we put together with the NAACP to have those discussions. We also have done a really, I think, effective job of reaching out to the various civic and minority groups and having those discussions about what their concerns are. And also by continuing to increase the diversity in my office, I think it's also important that we're able to have a dialogue and have a discussion. One of the things that we clearly saw as a need is we now have a Spanish-speaking person in our victim witness unit that can address questions head on and assist people who have a second language. So I think those are all very important steps. And I think, again, I don't see the system being broken. I don't see the system that we haven't addressed some of these issues, but can we do better? Absolutely. And that's where we continue to build on the success that we've had by continuing that dialogue and discussion with the various groups. And I look forward to that. Thank you.
I find it interesting that during the last question, Mr. Howe did not reference anything about racial bias. He spoke general terms about bias. The very first step in acknowledging that a problem exists is explicitly admitting that that problem does exist. There are racial disparities in the court system. It may not be intentional, but they do exist. So how do we elevate that? How do we address that? We reach out, we look at it, and we address the communities directly. I am the first person of color to run for this office. I am a Spanish-speaking Indian American. I will reach out to the communities directly. I will talk to them. I will reach out to law enforcement. Many of them have already reached out to me. We will continue those conversations. We will develop the trust of the community by going to the community. Simply being reactive is not enough. We need to be proactive. We shouldn't have waited this long to get a Spanish-speaking victims assistance individual. We need to stress the proactivity, and we can't sit back and be complacent or comfortable. So I will go to the communities. I will open the doors. I will invite whoever wants to come speak to me, I will do that firsthand, and I will do that on my own. I will not send somebody in my stead, because as the elected official, I am responsible to all of the Johnson County electorate, whether they're white, Hispanic, African American, Asian, whatever race, gender, or affiliation you may have. I will be volunteering and ready to speak to whatever group needs to be spoken to. And so we will address that and tackle that head on. But like I said, the first step is you have to admit a problem exists.
Thank you.
As district attorney, how might you handle a fatal use of force case involving local police? Zach Thomas.
As it's currently set up, reports are conducted by officer-involved training, officer-involved shooting team. They are jurisdictions that were not involved in the shooting. We rely heavily on that report because that's what the experts, that's what the law enforcement will put together. We will review that. We will look at that. We will talk to the victims involved, but most importantly, we're going to talk to law enforcement, and we're going to figure out what happened and why it happened. If there is a question of liability, we'll put that to the public through charges or through a grand jury. But most importantly of all, if there is a victim that was involved and there are questions about it, I will speak directly to the victim and I will speak directly to the victim's family. I will not hide behind KORA rules. I will not hide behind obstructing or not giving the victim's families the full information. The key is, just last month or 2 months ago, the Kansas City Star did an article about this. Every other county around the area sent the elected official to the scene of a crime. Steve Howe, in that interview, said, well, I send my chief deputy. That'll change under my watch. Accountability stops with the person elected. I will hold myself accountable. I will hold myself transparent, and I will give the public answers necessary. And rest assured, if a difficult decision comes up where charges need to be brought, I won't be scared to bring that.
Steve Howe?
Yeah, Johnson County again has been a leader in this area. Back in 2005 is when we started the officer involved shooting incident team, long before many jurisdictions even thought about that. And it's an independent evaluation of the case by outside agencies that gives some integrity to it and allows people to trust the investigation. You know, Zach said liability. Well, he doesn't understand exactly what my job is when I have an officer involved shooting incident, and that is not liability. The issue is to determine whether or not a proper use of force is done under Kansas law, and did the proper use of force follow Kansas law as far as self-defense. That's the only responsibility I have. Liability is something for other people to discuss, law enforcement agencies and their cities. My job is solely to determine whether or not under Kansas law it was a proper use of force. As far as what we do, when we have an officer involved shooting incident, I invite the families to my office. I talk to them. I discuss what their concerns are, and I tell them of my findings and try to answer as many questions as I can. I also provide access to any videos that are available for them to view. And in addition to that, we do a written report that sets forth the facts and then applies Kansas law to make a determination whether or not there was a proper use of force. In addition to that, I go before the media and answer questions that people might have about the incident. And so as far as transparency, I do the very best to allow the public to understand the reasons for my decision. And that is transparency. As far as opening up records that Mr. Thomas talked about, if I open it up to him or anybody else, I open it up to everybody. And there's very privileged documents and records that are in there that are really none of people's business. And so Johnny in the basement would still have access to the same records as anybody else, and then publish that on the web. And I think for privacy purposes, that's not the right thing to do. Dialogue and discussion and being transparent through these other methods is the right way to approach this and to make sure that we have transparency in our system.
Thank you both.
Well, transparency is a core pillar of building trust and removing systemic racism and the appearance of racism. What is the process for handling and tracking cases of police misconduct? How would you make information on police misconduct, data on investigations, prosecutions, and dispositions of those cases more transparent to the public? Steve Howe.
Well, first of all, I cannot control what the law enforcement agencies do in their policies, but I will say that to a certain extent, we have what's called a Giglio Policy. And a Giglio Policy is basically United States v. Giglio, where if an officer has misconduct that impugns upon their integrity, I have to disclose that to my opposing counsel. And so we have a Giglio policy in Johnson County where law enforcement, if their officers have misconduct, they advise me of this. We put them on the list, and we advised the opposing counsel of this. The other thing is, I will tell you, our law enforcement agencies, if they have officers like this, they're let go. They don't keep them around, and that's why we have such success here compared to other jurisdictions, is we don't tolerate that type of bad behavior. And so we work really hard to make sure that we have good, and the vast majority of officers are acting with integrity and ethics. We also are really, we have a great JIM system, Justice Information Management System, that tracks a lot of this information and provides guidance to us. This Criminal Justice Advisory Council also has looked at this, whether or not there's systemic racism, and we have a subcommittee that's been looking at the juvenile justice system. And I believe the next step is looking at the adult system. What things do the numbers say, and what can we do to adjust our behavior and our tactics and procedures to make sure that we're fair to all people and that we are not targeting certain groups over others. And so with our Justice Information Management System and our other partner agencies, we've actually been doing some work on that for years and years. And I think we're going to continue to expand that to make sure that the justice system is fair to all people, not just certain groups. You know, Lady Justice has a blindfold on, and the reason why she has a blindfold is things such as race, religion, your wealth should not matter in determining justice. And so I think we all have to work together in the justice system, that we do the right thing and do it the right thing for all people.
Zach Thomas.
First off, it goes without saying, Johnson County is blessed with absolutely fantastic law enforcement. I truly attribute Johnson County's law enforcement to be some of the best in the country. Definitely some of the best in the state, as I've traveled the state working criminal cases. But problems do exist. People aren't perfect, and issues do arise. And that's where transparency is vital. A couple of things Mr. Howe talked about are intriguing. The JIM system he credits with giving us data. This question was about transparency. That data is nowhere to be had. That data has not been shown to the public anywhere. Transparency involves having the public aware of it, not just Steve's office, not just my office, not just my master deputies or senior staff. You've got to give that information to the public. That's the very essence of transparency. Also, worth noting that JIMs will no longer be in existence effective 2021. So the system that Mr. Howe attributes as a great transparency item is gone. You can ask any lawyer about that. Any lawyer around Johnson County will tell you that JIMs is going to be disappearing. He talks about Giglio. Giglio is a system set up for lack of credibility, dishonesty. A similar system ought to be set up for racial bias, for crimes of racial profiling. He speaks very generally about how Giglio can attribute or be attributed to this. Never have I received a letter that this officer had a racial bias issue in the past. I've had cases involving officers that went up to the Supreme Court where the Supreme Court said racial bias existed in this and it must be overturned. Those cases were in Johnson County. Yet I've had cases with that exact same officer doing the exact same thing, and there's no Giglio letter. In order to be transparent, we need to gather information and make it available to the public. Officers aren't simply let go, as Mr. Howe alleged. If that were the case, Overland Park wouldn't have had a $70,000 severance. If that were the case, a case involving a police captain in Lenexa would actually receive some charging or prosecution, or the victims might have answers. Transparency involves communication. Over and over again, the current office has gotten too comfortable in not being transparent, in not communicating. I am running because I believe that those values are imperative to be an elected official, but to be the chief prosecutor of the county. I will bring those values to the forefront, and I will honor those values as a responsibility, not only to myself, but more importantly to the public. So I will set up a system similar to Giglio. I will advise and communicate with law enforcement agencies about any issues that may arise. And we will try and address it first off, but if that fails, alternative punishments, alternative recourse needs to be made available. And that's what I'll bring to the office.
Thank you.
We have seen an exponential increase in county drug case filings in the past 10 years. In 2010, the court had 107 methamphetamine cases filed, In 2019, 537 drug cases were filed. Severe mental illness in the jail is showing a 27% prevalence rate, and 1/3 of our detainees had a subsequent booking within 12 months. What is the role of the district attorney's office in helping people with substance abuse disorders and mental health issues access services? Zach Thomas.
The role shouldn't be couched in the term of helping those individuals, because that should be a goal. The role of the district attorney is to help prevent future crime. And the stats show that individuals suffering from substance abuse and mental health issues are more apt or often repeat offenders. So how do we do that? We can do it under two colors, but they're both the same thing. Do we claim that we're helping the individuals, or do we claim that we're preventing future crime? Both of which are goals of mine, and both of which are reasons why I stand so strongly in support of specialty courts like mental health court and drug court. Earlier, Mr. Howe said that Johnson County is a leader in addressing problems we face. Yet in 2016, then Sheriff Frank Denning said he ran the state's largest mental health institution, the Johnson County Jail. In February, at the NAACP law enforcement panel, now Sheriff Hayden said 80% of the jail is filled with drug addictions, with individuals that suffer from either drug addiction or mental health issues. The problems existed for a while. We can't be reactive. We need to be proactive. What do? We implement specialty courts. This isn't a liberal idea. This isn't some idea I created on my own. They've been in existence for over 25 years. They have strong bipartisan support all across the country. Look no further than the state of Kansas, where 13 other courts already implement either a drug court or a veterans treatment court, or a drug court or mental health court. Senator Moran, Representative Roger Marshall got federal funding to house these courts, to use this in Ellis County, and now they brag about the success of not having an individual locked behind bars, of having a member contributing to society. Now, Mr. Howe's going to say that Johnson County is blessed with resources like the residential center and the therapeutic community. During a county commissioners meeting, he said, where's the gap? What's the necessity for specialty courts? Well, Mr. Howe, here's the answer. That therapeutic community is only available to felons. That therapeutic community requires incarceration. That therapeutic community requires high-level offenders. Majority of the crimes that are committed by individuals with drug addiction and or mental health issues are low-level crimes. Why do we wait? Why do we put our county at risk of higher-level crimes when we could address it at the beginning? When we could use a drug court, when we can use a mental health court? And the stats speak for themselves. On average, a drug court or mental health court reduces recidivism 30 to 40% of the time. On average, a drug court or mental health court saves the county taxpayers $6,500 per individual. It's a no-nonsense, no political affiliation approach to addressing the underlying issue to save the county taxpayer money in litigation, incarceration, law enforcement time, but ultimately the goal there is you're saving lives. It's time to stop being reactive. We need to be proactive. It's been so long that now at this stage, unfortunately, we are being reactive.
Thank you. Steve Howe.
Well, apparently Zach's been asleep for the last 5 or 6 years, because we've received several national awards on these particular issues. It started with the co-responder program, where we embed mental health workers in with law enforcement agencies to triage situations and prevent people from actually going to jail and getting them the necessary services. We've also increased the number of trainings for law enforcement in dealing with mentally ill people. We also have the jail instituting a questionnaire to people being booked into jail to determine if they have a substance abuse or mental health issue, and then get them in contact with mental health workers in the jail to provide them some additional services and direction. Those are all things that we've worked on for a number of years. I've also expanded my mental health diversion plan, which actually has not probation officers, but mental health workers providing assistance. We've expanded that program. The Veterans Treatment Court is another mental health diversion plan that has provided assistance to people in need. So we've done a lot of extensive work, and the reason why we receive awards. And I think it's folly to sit there and ignore all the great work that we've done and say, well, if we had a specialty court, all would be good. Well, let me ask the question. If the specialty courts are that great, then why is Jackson County Specialty Court in session and we still see the drug violence that's going on in Jackson County? It doesn't solve all the problems. Can it help? Sure, but it's not a panacea that's going to solve all the issues for drug offenders and mental health. The therapeutic community and the residential center are basically inpatient facilities to provide assistance to those in need. The juvenile justice system, Judge Foster already has a drug court in his court. So we deal with many different issues. And the thing about it is, drug courts are typically done when you don't have the resources to do the things that we do. We go the extra mile and have extra programs that many jurisdictions like Jackson County doesn't have. And that's why we're a step above a lot of these. And I agree with Zach that punishment doesn't mean that people who possess drugs should be incarcerated. And in fact, really, it should be about treatment and trying to break that recidivism. And that's the key to success. Now, drug dealers, it's a different animal. Those people should be punished who are basically causing this type of recidivism. But those that are actually offenders who are in need get many services in Johnson County. We are not falling behind, but in fact, leaders in this area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, technical violations of probation and parole. They cause nearly 40% of Kansas prison admissions. The vast majority of these technical violations do not include new criminal allegations, but they're a result of failing to report, failing to pay fines and fees, failed drug tests, not completing treatment. As district attorney, you will be faced with presenting information to the court on the decision to revoke probation and send people to prison. Will you commit to not recommending incarceration to the court for non-criminal technical violations of probation and parole? Please explain your answer. Steve Howe.
Well, first of all, in Johnson County, it's a myth to say that a technical violation the first time around is going to get you incarcerated in the penitentiary. It just doesn't happen. And so I know our community corrections director and our court services directors, and with the changes in Kansas law over the last 5 years, it just doesn't happen. Only individuals who show a consistent pattern of violating probation and have 3 or 4 instances where they're back before the court, do they finally give up on that individual and maybe send them up to the penitentiary. But quite frankly, with the way the sentences are, you're only probably talking about 2 or 3 months. And so it's really interesting. One of the things that Robert Sullivan, who's our community corrections director, wants to do is change our philosophy on reintegrating people back into society and getting them back on their feet. And so we went to a program last year that uses a European model of trying to triage people and get them into work release programs where they get treatment, get a job skill, and get them back on their feet to change that cycle in and out of incarceration. But really, it's a myth that the first violations, technical violations, someone goes off to the penitentiary. It's only after a consistent pattern do judges send people up. And it's not something that, you know, we stomp our feet and say we want everybody to go away for the first positive drug test. And in fact, in our diversion plan, it takes multiple violations before we even file a violation of our diversion plan in those instances. And we acknowledge that when you have a substance abuse problem, you're going to have ups and downs. And that's just it is a reality. And so we all understand what we want to do is break the cycle. We don't necessarily want to incarcerate people. And so we work really hard to make, we try to break that recidivism by giving the people the help that they need. Sometimes, guess what? Incarceration is the only alternative, but it's the last resort. And I'm very proud of the fact that we have come a long way since the 90s as far as how to address drug issues and drug users. And instead, we use a more therapeutic approach instead of a really hard approach of sending people away to the penitentiary. Thank you.
Zach Thomas.
It's a great question that you've asked, because Johnson County is either first or second in the state of Kansas in sending individuals to prison based upon technical violations. The numbers are egregious. Now, the question asks, can I commit to not recommending prison sentences on a technical violation? That's a case-by-case situation. I cannot do a general commitment to that. What I can tell you is that it's a travesty that Johnson County leads the state in sending people to prison based on technical violations. It's an absolute waste of taxpayer money. We need to address that, and we need to tackle that head on. One of the interesting things we mentioned here is diversion. Under Steve Howe, if you're on diversion for any crime and you even miss a urinalysis test, your diversion is revoked. There's no forgiveness. There's no therapy. You can talk to any lawyer or any individual that's ever been involved with diversion. The current procedure says if you miss a UA, that's considered positive and your diversion is revoked and you're forced to have a conviction on your record. That's not leniency. That's not honesty. That's not transparency. We need an elected official who is going to hold people accountable. But when people make a mistake, they might make one more. That shouldn't ruin their life. That shouldn't ruin their career. We need to have the leniency available. The policy is as it is. The current office likes to seek punishment. The stats are what they are. Johnson County leads the state in sending people to prison based upon technical violations. And let me take time out of this to go back one more step. Mental health diversion, a tool that Mr. Howe explained as a great benefit to society and here in Johnson County. Since Steve Howe took office, 73,000 cases have been prosecuted. Only 149 mental health diversion contracts have been given. That's less than 0.2%. That's not therapeutic. That's not lenient. That's not accounting for issues such as drug addiction or mental health. I can't give you a general commitment to whether or not we can unilaterally or universally not recommend prison sanctions for somebody who doesn't report for 3 years on probation or who goes off and we don't know where they are. But we need to change the approach that's currently in office. We need to give that at least an opportunity. Thank you.
Proponents of police reform often cite a perceived conflict of interest when district attorney candidates receive donations or endorsements from law enforcement officials and police unions. Do you believe there is a conflict of interest? Are you accepting donations from police unions? Zach Thomas.
I have not solicited or accepted any donations from police unions. I have not solicited or accepted any endorsements from law enforcement. My perspective on the position of district attorney is that no politics should be involved. When you take endorsements, when you take donations, you allow for the political games to come into play. Justice is not a political affiliation. Justice is needed to be universally applied equally. And so I have not solicited, nor have I accepted any donations from law enforcement organizations, law enforcement entities, or law enforcement individuals. That's not to say I can't work with them. I absolutely love law enforcement. Ever since Deputy Collins lost his life in the line of duty, I've flown a flag in my yard. I've supported law enforcement every day. But at times, there's no connection, there's no impropriety. If I am district attorney, if there is a police captain who is accused of embezzling money from a nonprofit, I will at least speak to the victims to make sure they know where I stand. I won't chastise them like the current administration has. If there's an issue with law enforcement, I will address it. But I must stress over and over again, because rumors started going around that I'm anti-law enforcement. I am blessed to be in Johnson County with absolutely fantastic law enforcement. Having said that, I do not want their money. I do not want their endorsement, because I don't want any sense of impropriety. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Howe.
In regards to police reform and the relationship between law enforcement and the DA's office, you've got to have a good working relationship with each other. When that doesn't happen, you see chaos. And so it's important that we have a good working relationship. And I guess I don't quite understand how it's a conflict of interest to respect each other and the work that we do, and still be able to stay impartial and objective. You know, when I take the oath of office as district attorney, I swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Kansas. And that means that I uphold that for all people and be just and fair about my implementation of the law. And even though we work with law enforcement every single day, we have had some officers who have run afoul of the law. And guess what? We prosecute them. And they know that. And they don't want bad cops. And so they have no problems with us prosecuting domestic violence cases, DUIs, you name it. We've had some in our jail that have had improper relationship with inmates. Those have all been charged. So when we talk about my duty is for public safety, not politics. I don't play games. I don't play favorites. And so I treat law enforcement like every other citizen. They get a fair shake, but they don't get special treatment. And, you know, it's interesting. Zach talks about he has a great relationship with law enforcement, but on an NAACP Zoom meeting, you flat out called our police chiefs liars. And so when you start knocking down those barriers and those relationships from the get-go, you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth. You can't say you have a great relationship and then call the 6 police chiefs over the major cities of our county a bunch of liars. And that doesn't fly, Zach. You can't do that. When you don't have a good relationship with law enforcement and you don't respect them, you don't have success. And the reason why we've had success in law enforcement is our ability to work together as respected individuals. And they're going to get a fair shake, but no special treatment from me. Thank you.
You didn't answer the question, are you accepting donations from police unions?
I have not received any money from police unions.
Thank you.
Advocates of drug decriminalization believe the criminal legal system needs to look beyond marijuana decriminalization. They call for wide-scale decriminalization of drugs as part of any successful harm reduction approach. Do you believe that declining to prosecute drug possession, thereby effectively decriminalizing small quantities of any controlled substance, is a better use of criminal legal system resources? Why or why not? Steve Howe.
I am not a proponent of decriminalizing drugs. If you look at the amount of violence in our community, both in Johnson County and Wyandotte and Jackson County, most of it is drug related. And so you've got to address the issue, not ignore it. And if you don't do anything about it as far as criminal penalties, and accountability doesn't mean I have to lock people up, but there has to be something done to stop this violence. In Johnson County, most of the shootings and murders that we now have, it's based on possession of marijuana and THC cartridges and drug rips. And so it's a source of a lot of the violence in our community, and decriminalizing it will not solve the problem. And so it's important for us to address these issues. You know, we had a group with a bunch of therapists in there, and they were asked the question, should we decriminalize marijuana so we can address bigger issues with drug issues? And what the therapist said is, no, I don't agree with that. Because what I see is if somebody is a heroin addict or a fentanyl addict or a meth addict, if they use marijuana, so many times I see that as a mechanism for them to fall off the wagon and go back to the drugs. And so even the therapists don't like this idea of decriminalizing drugs. It doesn't solve the problems. It doesn't address the issues. And quite frankly, the use of narcotics like marijuana, if you look at the potency levels of marijuana now and these THC cartridges, they are highly, highly hallucinogenic drugs. It's not just a little buzz, but it has a huge impact on those individuals. And the other impact we're seeing is the fact that a lot of our driving while intoxicated and driving while drugged fatalities are coming from the use of multiple drugs. And so we're seeing that as much as we are seeing driving under the influence of alcohol. And so I see it as a growing problem, and we ought to address the problem and not just ignore it and decriminalize it. And so I think, again, it goes back to the strategies of trying to work on breaking that recidivism, trying to provide assistance. And again, we work really hard with the community corrections director and other people in our criminal justice system to figure out strategies to break that cycle of recidivism. A lot of it is driven by, drugs and mental health. And so again, we've led the way in trying to come up with these solutions. And we also we've got some solutions in using the Bexar County approach of having a triage center for people with mental health and drug problems. And that's our next big push, is to try to create that type of county drug treatment and triage center like they have down in San Antonio, Texas. And that's one of my major goals in the coming 4 years.
Zach Thomas.
First off, I've got to respond to a comment by Mr. Howe regarding calling police chiefs liars, taken completely out of context. If you want to provide it to the public and be transparent, I welcome you to. That comment was made when every police chief said a minority had not been shot by law enforcement. You and I both can know that that's false. So if you want to be transparent and accountable, you can say it yourself, or you can put it out to the public to review. With respect to decriminalization of drugs, we can't do that. Absolutely cannot. There are too many problems here in Johnson County under the current administration where violent crime has gone up, where young kids were shot and killed because of drugs. In all the communications I've had since my campaign started with law enforcement, they've cited to the fact that using marijuana, the smell, the odor, the sale, opens up the door to more detailed investigations that can help get to the distributors who are creating the problem. Now, the difference is, I'm not going to make felons out of minor possessions of marijuana. A 19-year-old should not become a felon because they had a joint in their car. The punishments can be altered. The role of the district attorney is not simply convictions, but it's to get justice. If you're driving down state line and you're pulled over on the east side, that's not a crime. But if you're pulled over on the west side, that is a crime. If you're driving across the Wyandotte County, Johnson County border, if you get pulled over in Wyandotte County, fine and release. If you get pulled over in Johnson County, you're looking at a year of diversion or probation. If you do the same thing in Douglas County, exact same situation. We've got to address the issue because more serious crimes still take place related to drug usage, related to drug possession. But we can address and alleviate the problems concerned with punishment by not mandating that people go through the same punishment if they got caught with one joint or if they had a low-level distribution charge. It's still a year probation. So I can't decriminalize drugs. I won't decriminalize drugs, but we can drastically alter the punishments that come as a result of that. And then with respect to the drug treatment center, this has never been mentioned before. San Antonio employs a mental health police force, first co-responders, and they use a mental health court. I am so proud of the fact that my campaign has at least reframed Mr. Howe's platform to include progressive things like specialty courts, where we can have facilities that address the very addiction instead of simply returning these people to prison over and over again. It's about time we stop that revolving door. It's about time we address the underlying issues. So I applaud you, Mr. Howe, for embracing an idea I finally brought to the forefront. Thank you.
Recently, the American Bar Association called for an end to felony disenfranchisement and to restore voting rights to people currently incarcerated, as well as those currently on probation and parole. Explain your views on supporting efforts in Kansas to restore voting rights to people currently incarcerated, to those on parole, and to those on probation. Zach Thomas.
When you commit a crime, you need to be held accountable. Accountability can vary, but if it's a felony, that's a serious crime. And you have to be held accountable with the consequences that involve either prison, parole, and the collateral consequences that arise out of that. If you are successful in completing those terms and reach a stage where you can expunge or clear your record, I have absolutely zero qualms with allowing somebody to vote. I think it's their right. They've done what they're supposed to do and should be able to do it. But if you're currently incarcerated and seeking to vote, I do have problems with that. I do have issues with that. Simply put, that's an issue I can't address at this point. I can't change my stance. I believe that if you are incarcerated or if you're on parole, the collateral consequences that go along with that, you have to be held accountable for that. And until the laws change, until the statutes change to provide for that, I will stand by those laws.
Thank you. Steve Howe.
There is one thing that we do agree on, and that is providing voter rights to individuals who are incarcerated or on post-release supervision. I do not agree with. Kansas law has the ability for that individual, after they complete their supervision, to have their record expunged and go through the expungement process, which would allow it to be taken off their record. And to me, that's the mechanism that should be used. It allows for review by the district attorney's office, which we do all the time, and we assist people in getting their records expunged hundreds and hundreds of times every single year. People who make a mistake, get their life turned around, and show that they are productive members of society. And so we do that, and I support giving people a second opportunity to lead their life as productive members of our community. Now, in regards to voting rights, I think it also depends, at least my personal view is, it would also depend on the type of crime that person is committed. And so I would have some issues with some of the most severe crimes, but I do think that we need to reassess that. And if we can see that that individual has led a productive life over a period of time and changed their ways, so to speak, that they might have an opportunity to once again get the great honor that we all have in America, which is to vote. And so many people across the world don't have that opportunity, and so we should cherish that, but we also need to be responsible about that as well. So I guess it would depend on what that would look like, but I might be willing to support it for lower level offenses.
Thank you.
Okay, just received notice. This is the last question. Just mind the clock a bit. Unemployed and underemployed Kansans often can't afford bail, leaving them stuck in jail, while wealthier Kansans accused of the very same crime can post bail, thereby buying their freedom and returning home. This system leads to people remaining in jail for extended periods of time, which contributes to bloated jail populations and bloated budgets. This is a source of inequity, including systemic racism in the justice system. How will you assure that the ability to pay will not be a factor in determining who can be released, so that those with means will receive the same treatment as those without? Steve Howe.
Thank you. Again, Johnson County has led the way. So years and years ago, we had what's called a pretrial, under the Criminal Justice Advisory Council, we had pretrial services and policies. And we actually developed a policy and a grid where if you're a minor offender with little or no criminal history, you get a signature bond. And we've been implementing that for years now. And that's a big reason why, if you look at our jail population, it has remained pretty constant throughout this process. And so I've been very pleased with how that's been used and implemented. And I think there needs to be a distinction between minor offenses where people have low criminal history or none. Those individuals don't stay in our jails. It's the individuals who are repeat offenders who commit serious offenses where I think it's important to have some kind of surety or some kind of bond be posted before they are let out of jail. Now, should we be fair about the way we implement it? Absolutely. And if we have like situation or crimes, then we should treat them in like ways. But I think the important thing about our criminal justice system, it's very fact driven. And so if a person has a huge criminal history and it's a very serious crime, they should have a heavy bond. And in some instances, they should remain in custody during the time that they're awaiting trial. But in Johnson County, again, we've led the way, and I've been very pleased about being involved in that process and really, again, showing that it can work, but it has to be measured. And again, for public safety reasons, the more serious offenders, we need to make sure that we protect the public by keeping them incarcerated. And that also includes people who are serial career criminals who are in and out of the penitentiary, hurting people in the community over and over again. I think those individuals, even if you're talking about more low-level crimes, that's when you need to start talking about, do we need a surety in order to protect the community? So I'm very pleased about where we've gone so far. Again, we're leading the way. And I think it's absolutely a valid discussion point that should be analyzed by the communities throughout the country to make sure they're doing it right and not necessarily, I'll put it this way. If we keep somebody locked up for a minor crime and they lose their job, we're setting them up to fail. And so if it's a minor crime, why not let them loose and let them continue to work? Because if we lock them up and they lose their job, then we are essentially setting them up to continue to fail in our society. And so I'm a big believer in make sure that we have dedicated processes and that we focus our efforts on the ones that are really making a huge impact negatively in our community.
Zach Thomas.
I absolutely do believe that economic disparities do pose problems. I was once a public defender, and I saw how individuals who did not have the resources languished in jail while they waited for bond to be lowered. I saw how individuals charged with probation violations before COVID were automatically assessed a $50,000 cash surety bond. Crimes of poverty, driving while suspended, automatically taken in and put in custody. I'll give you another analogy. If you are driving down K10 and you're pulled over by a City of Lenexa officer and you have a joint in your car, you're given a ticket and order to appear. However, if you're pulled over by a Johnson County sheriff, the system is set up that you are arrested, taken to jail, and wait for a bond to be issued. If that's a Saturday afternoon and you're going to a KU football game or KU basketball game or just Lawrence in general, you've got to wait till Monday morning or Monday afternoon at 1:30 before a judge will set bond. These situations should not be, we should not be waiting to address these situations. They should have been addressed already. Mr. Howe says they should be analyzed by communities all across the country. That's the role of the district attorney, to analyze this. It should have been done already. We need to stop being reactive. The problems existed. It's not something new that just popped up. The problem has existed for a while. And we need to have somebody who's not only going to address this problem, but be proactive about problems in the future. Because ultimately, if you've got no ties to the criminal justice system and you're a simple taxpayer, the cost of taxes, the amount of taxes that you have to pay in the current system to continually incarcerate the same individuals, to continually incarcerate people charged with low-level crimes, well, your taxes go up. Bond is necessary on high-level cases. We agree on that 100%. Bond should be appropriate given the charge and given the nature of the charge. There has to be a serious readdressing of how bail is set. And on top of that, it's not just bail. Let's look at how diversion is used in Johnson County. If you don't have the money to pay the diversion fees, you can't get diversion. If you don't have money to pay the restitution up front, you're no longer eligible for diversion. So if you're wealthy and commit a crime that involves a couple $1,000s worth of restitution, well, you can pay off that restitution and get diversion. But if you're indigent and can't afford the restitution, well, you're not going to get diversion. We need to address that. We need to have a leader who's going to address that and tackle that head on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now I believe it's time for closing remarks. 1 minute. Zach Thomas.
Folks, I want to thank you all again for sitting through here and learning a little more about the district attorney race. I want to thank the sponsors and co-sponsors that hosted this. My name's Zach Thomas. I'm running to be your next Johnson County District Attorney because I couldn't sit back idly anymore and watch this county fall behind. There are issues of race that have become prevalent in society today. Yet when posed the question, Mr. Howe could not even take the first step towards admitting a problem exists. There are questions about economic disparity. And when posed the question, we can't talk about diversion and the disparities that exist. We need to have a leader that's proactive. We need to have a leader that's got courtroom experience, that has trial experience, not from 2008 and before, but presently. I am a trial lawyer. I am a criminal lawyer. I have made my practice being successful in the courtroom and outside of it. I'm asking you for your vote on November 3rd because I could pave a better way forward with Johnson County. Thank you very much.
Steve Howe.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity that everyone has given me to be able to talk about this race for Johnson County District Attorney. It's really two polar opposites. I bring all the experience to the table as a prosecutor. Zach Thomas has 0 days of experience as a prosecutor. And when he talks about we're behind, that belies the truth. And if you go to my website, you'll see all the accomplishments that we have in Johnson County. You see that all the awards that we received as leaders in the criminal justice field throughout this country. And that's not falling behind, folks. That's leading. And I've been part of that leadership as the chief law enforcement officer in Johnson County. And not only have we led in innovative programs, but we've also reduced crime. The KBI index in 2009 compared to now indicates that the actual per person per crime rate has gone down. And yeah, that wasn't just me, but it was me and the rest of the team of people that I have led in Johnson County for the success that we have had. In Johnson County, we've worked really hard to get the job done, to keep the public safe for our families and our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Steve Howe, Zach Thomas, for participating in the forum today. Also, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters of Johnson County, Mainstream Coalition, Advocacy and Awareness Group, Johnson County Latina Leadership Network, the Northeast Johnson County Chamber, my very own ACLU of Kansas. Please join us on Tuesday, September 29th at 4:30 p.m. for the Johnson County Board of Commissioners Forum. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you.